Number 4, after I demolished essentially all of your favorite talking points in my previous videos,
That's not true.
You're so full of baloney.
you all now cling primarily to the classic I shouldn't see this thing argument. You
You say so.
shouldn't see this thing argument.
Do I really have to say it?
Say what?
Yes, Kate. Say what?
You need glasses.
And where is his glasses? He can't see without his glasses. Put his glasses on. Put on his glasses. He can't see without his glasses.
Shouldn't see this thing argument. You
Giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
Not this year.
All right.
You love this one because you can lie about heights and distances, do incorrect math, and in general act incredulous without having to actually do any science. You love this one because you can lie about
Where are we? My name is Stephen Hawking. I believe that anyone can answer big questions for themselves.
The best experiments are incredibly simple, but point us to profound truth. Incredibly simple, but point us to profound truth.
And there's a few things about this that many people have caught on to, and we're just going to show them, one at a time. And what the intent of this is to show how much editing is actually done and how much blatant deception is going on, and the fact that they are not keeping a strict timeline, going forward on this. And I'm going to start out first of all by pointing out that here's Joy and what's her name sitting in the helicopter. They're getting ready to lift off, and as you can see, there's no doors, right? The doors have been removed from the helicopter as compared to when it flew in, right? But what we're going to see now, here they are, they're in there, and now they're going to take off. And then Joy is even going to make the comment, oh, I love the fact that there's no doors. So let's take a listen to that.
I love that there are no doors.
All right, we'll go ahead and lift off.
Notice, now the doors are back on again. Not a big deal, but just something to point out.
I love that there are no doors.
And she says, I love that there are no doors. Isn't that wonderful?
You love this one because you can lie about
Jim, we're going to be at the top of the pyramid rock.
I got him.
Okay, now another thing that I want you guys to take note of is where the helicopter is, and look at the background behind it. Here we've got Pyramid Rock behind it. Just make a mental note of that, and let's continue on.
Yeah, I have you on the telescope. Go ahead and land.
Okay, now this scene, where has Pyramid Rock gone? He just told him to land. Now we've got a completely different scene here, right? Whoops, what's going on with that? Well, let's keep watching this because there's a few other wonderful anomalies in this. All right, next thing you guys need to pay attention to is you will see 3 birds come in from the left and fly across left to right. We need to also pay very close attention to that. Let's watch it again.
As it lands, it completely disappears from my line of sight. Joey, are you still airborne?
Yeah. Can you see us landing?
The reports from the helicopter, they're still flying, but I can't see it.
Okay, so we have 3 birds. Now I'm going to go to, hang on, let me play just a minute more of this because I'm going to make sure I've got everything on it.
To wrap your head around it in that short of time, it was a little difficult for me. I was like, this is crazy.
We have landed in our position.
Okay, Joey, go ahead and lift off.
They plan to ascend until Jim can see them on the horizon. Then they'll tell him their altitude.
Let me know when you can see us on spots on the horizon.
Okay, now let's look again. First of all, this background is completely different than the one that we just showed a minute ago. We've got a lot less rugged terrain. This is not nowhere near as green. In other words, it looks very, very different. Now let's keep watching as to what happens. We're going to see a couple very interesting things happen. Well, look at that. All of a sudden, the scenery has now changed again back to where it was before the chopper actually dropped down and landed. Oh, and did you see what happened right there? All right, see these birds? This is exactly the same birds that were there that flew in just a minute ago, and I'm going to prove this to you guys in just a second.
You love this one.
So let's look at the Kaleidoscope video here really quick and see what he has to say about it, and then we will proceed forward. So let's listen to him.
Okay, so if we take and bring in the 2 images, the 2 still images I took out of the PBS special there, bring them in here, and we can tint one of them. This is the 2 images I brought in. One had a helicopter and one did. We were watching the helicopter go below the waterline there in this sequence. And in both sequences we saw these birds flying by. So I tinted this one green so it's a little bit different. I'll take and overlay this one on that one. And then we play with the opacity a bit. Can you see what's going on here? You've got the 3 birds and you've got the same features in the water at that moment in time.
Yeah, same features in the water, and when you actually look at it playing, the wave patterns are even identical in the water. But he's going to get to that here. So let's keep going.
Okay. The only thing changing is the helicopter. How would that be?
How could that be indeed?
Because you can lie about
Right? So how good was that? How is that possible?
Because you can lie about
It's because it's photoshopped. It's obvious video manipulation. They're calling this science. They're saying that they landed this helicopter 6 miles across on the other shoreline, and it disappeared below the waterline due to the curvature of the Earth and the curvature of the lake. And this is the evidence that they showed you in looking through that telescope. But how is it possible that these same 3 birds are visible at 2 different times? One with a helicopter there and one without there. It's pretty obvious that this is just video manipulation and pseudoscience. This isn't. If this was so easy to demonstrate the curvature of the Earth, why would they have to fake this? I mean, it's obvious that this has just totally been faked. On PBS, nonetheless. Millions of people watch this worldwide, and this is passed off as science. This is scientific proof that the curvature of the Earth exists, and they went out to a lake and measured it. How is it possible? Look at that. Right? There it is. Clear as mud.
We're trying to.
You love this one
A
because
whole bunch of ballers in there saying that it's just called video editing, guys. It's just editing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And if we did video editing on our videos, we would get crucified. So sorry, ballers, that isn't going to fly.
No.
Yeah, clearly that helicopter wasn't actually there. They added the helicopter in later. That's not video editing. That's fraud.
Right.
Yes.
That's scientific fraud.
Yep.
Yes, it
I
is.
totally. I was a Globe believer and I saw this. I'd be so embarrassed. Like how can you watch this and not be just embarrassed with your model? Like, man, this is a chance to show me how globe the Earth is, and this is the way they went about it with like John said, fraud evidence and just nonsense. No way.
in general act incredulous without having to actually do any science.
Wait a second, am I missing something? Just the helicopter's the wrong way.
I'm sorry, the helicopter's what?
The wrong way. Yeah, that right there. So they're looking behind them and they've got, is that right where they're taking off? And there's like dirt and stuff behind them. Oh, right there. Okay, but if he's across the water, the head should be to his right. Correct?
Oh,
yeah,
I see what
you're
saying.
right.
It's the wrong way.
Yeah, it is.
I never even caught that one.
This has to be on purpose.
I never even caught that one. That's a good one, Darren.
You love this one.
This is dirt.
Could you imagine if we had to like defraud people and like lie and falsify videos in order to? I mean, there wouldn't be any flat earthers if we had to do that. I mean, that's just man.
John, the globe Earth is so true that you can just fake this stuff and it doesn't matter. It's
It
just
is still
that
true. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you can lie about.
In general act incredulous without having to actually do any science.
Oh, and let's think. You're the IIG, you go out and you decide to do this test, and you chose the Salton Sea. Okay, so let's see if there's any reason why you chose that sea. So what causes water to rise up and create the distortion that we see above the ocean or lakes? Evaporation, correct. Okay, now what causes evaporation? Excellent, heat. Okay, so where exactly is the Salton Sea? Well, it only happens to be located in the hottest part of California. We also know that the hottest temperature ever recorded was in California. Where was that at? It was in Death Valley. Now, Death Valley is a few hours away from Salton Sea, but do they share any common characteristics? Well, let's see. What is a unique characteristic about Death Valley? Well, one of the unique things is it's located below sea level, 280 feet below sea level. Now, the Salton Sea, is that located below sea level? It is, 230 feet below sea level. So basically, it's sitting inside of a bowl, baking in the heat all day. That's where the Salton Sea exists. So you've got the hottest possible place, the hottest possible location. It's so hot that around the lake, mud bubbles up because of the geothermal activity below the lake. So we said evaporation causes the water molecules that sit in the air. So we have the hottest place where the water is hot. And so the hotter the water, the more evaporation, right? Well, look it up. The Salton Sea, 85 to 90 degree water in June and July. So hot water, hot air, evaporation. And so we have these little tiny water molecules sitting above the water, but are they your normal everyday freshwater molecules? Nope. These are saltwater molecules, the same ones that sit above the ocean. Or wait, are they the same ones that sit above the ocean? Because we know that saltwater has a higher refractive index than freshwater, so we know that the ocean has a higher refraction than the lakes, but let's look into the Salton Sea. Is it more or less salt than the ocean? Guess what? It's 30% more salt, giving it an even higher refractive index. So now you've got a higher refractive index, hotter water, hotter temperature, more evaporation, more molecules, all sitting above this lake. Nice conditions for your unbiased, independent investigation of the shape of the Earth. Really, when you look at it, you've got the IIG and ball worshippers. So far, they have basically two experiments to speak of. They've got Stephen Hawking's experiment, in which he totally faked it, and you've got this experiment, which was totally done under every possible condition to give the ball result. So if I were you guys, I'd be embarrassed.
You love this one.
We've got video shown here of them saying they see these balloons. Do those look 40 feet from the sea level to you? Yeah, me neither.
You can see both of them. Perfect. All right, Josh, help them.
Now here, try to listen carefully to the conversation this guy in the black shirt with the tan shorts is having. He's telling them that the guy next to him just was spotted. The balloons were spotted by the other side. And whoever he's talking to on the phone says something to the effect of, well, he can't see you because he can't look over the curve. Basically saying it's impossible that we would be able to see you right now, yet they just were spotted. They were seen, And he says, okay, good, glad. Go tell them that you can see us. And then the guys on the other side are saying, no, that's impossible. You can't see over the curve. Listen.
I know, but he sees where it is, and point to it, and look there. Yeah, go.
I know,
but he sees where it is, and point to it, and look there. Yeah, go.
You all now cling primarily to the classic "I shouldn't see this thing" argument.
You can see both of them.
Shouldn't see this thing argument.
I know, but he sees where it is, and point to it, and look there. Yeah, go.
So how far would you say we're up off the water right now?
I'd say 10 feet, maybe?
Yeah, I think I'd say that too. I mean, 15 at the very most.
Yeah, I don't think that much either.
So again, if I was a ball believer, how embarrassing. I would much rather be a flat earther than be embarrassed to be a ball earther and know that all the experiments that people are doing have to be faked, have to be contrived, have to be in the most perfect conditions to get the result that I'm looking for. That's how it must be embarrassing.
In general, act incredulous without having to actually do any science.
The test is starting right now. At first, all the stripes are clearly visible. But sure enough, as the boat reaches the horizon, the stripes begin to disappear one by one.
And you see that the red stripe that was at the bottom has completely disappeared, and it's now getting closer to sort of the middle green stripe, that is.
So we've lost about 1.5 stripes.
Right. So this can only happen why?
Because of the curvature of the Earth. Curvature of the Earth.
You love this one because well, every time you whine about this, the objects are always suspiciously close, such that you can fudge the numbers.
The curvature on that tells us, when we put that into the equation, that we should have 0.08 inches of curvature, which break that down into centimeters. We should have 1/4 of 1 centimeter of change, yet they all of a sudden have 10 inches. Definitely seems scientific. Back to Deception Lagoon.
Remember, if the lake is flat, it would be the same height as before.
Now look at this view. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. We can actually see the laser coming from the shore. So why isn't she behind some sort of wall of water? This is only at 3 miles, and look where the laser's going. Now it's shooting off into space. I mean, is the lake curved that much? It's another ridiculous lie.
I don't even think this beam is going to hit our boat.
Here's how we know that they are frauding the whole system. Because all they did was make their results match what they thought they should be. They used the curvature calculator, which for 3 miles equals 6 feet. However, they forgot to put in the eye height of the observer. They would have done that and put in the 2 feet high laser pointer and then put a target distance of 3 miles. Well, sorry. The target hidden height should have only been 1 foot, not 6.
The numbers.
That's called science fraud, my friends.
Well, every time you whine about this, the objects are always suspiciously close.
Go to this YouTube channel, Nouvelle Géographie Planétaire. I probably slaughtered that, but I'll have a link in the description. Watch the whole video because he goes into much more detail about the location and other evidence supporting the veracity of the photograph. But please go over there and subscribe and show your support for such an amazing feat. This new surface-to-surface photograph was taken at a record long distance of 326 miles or 529 kilometers. The previous record, surface-to-surface photograph shown on the Beyond Horizons website, was 443 kilometers or 275 miles. The new photograph we are going to look at today was from 326 miles or 51 miles further.
Suspiciously close.
Here is a Google map of where the photograph was taken. What makes this even more amazing is the fact that the target island location was only a height of 85 feet. The photograph was taken on top of this peak at an elevation of 3,212 feet or 979 meters. Here is the target location. It is an island off of Corsica with an elevation of 85 feet. You can add another 40 feet for the lighthouse. Here is the record-breaking photograph. You can see the little white lighthouse on top. The viewing direction also lines up with the photographer and the city in front, but you can watch the original video to see how everything lines up. According to the globe model, the target hidden height at an observation height of 3,212 feet and a distance of 326 miles is, and are you ready for this, 43,848 feet. The top of the lighthouse would have been only 125 feet above the water, and you can see it in the photograph 326 miles away. That is just impossible under the globe model. 43,848 feet should be hidden behind the curvature, and you can see a lighthouse at only 85 feet above the water. Like so many other observations, that ocean is flat. Ergo, the Earth must also be flat. Thank you, Nouvelle Géographie Planétaire, for sharing this amazing flat Earth proof. Thank you.
And they're always over water, so you can lie about refractive effects to people who have no idea how refraction works. And they're always over water.
Hello everyone, welcome to another shocking infrared video that proves the Earth is incredibly flat. You're gonna be totally amazed, folks. We'll be applying the principles of photogrammetry to the aerial infrared images that I've taken, and we'll be using professional software to extract the 3D models of our world, and the results are simply shocking. First, I'm going to show you how it works. I took a trip from San Francisco to Portland, right past Mount Shasta, and here's a few clips. I also captured a set of images with my camera, as you can see here, as I was flying past it, because I knew I wanted to try out this photogrammetry. The software I'll be using is called Metashape, and this is how it's used. Photogrammetry software lets you input a set of images, and then you process them to create a sparse cloud of data points, and then you can process a dense cloud of points. Basically, it looks at the information in the images and how it's shifted horizontally and vertically to determine the depth. Also reads the information of the camera that's embedded in the images and determines the focal length in terms of pixels, etc. And thus it can determine the depth to the geometry. And the results are simply incredible, folks. I mean, just look at this stuff, you know, with a few images. I have a 3D model here of Mount Shasta that I can rotate. Now on the back side of it, there's holes because there's no information there. But if you want to create a full 360 model, you got to take pictures all the way around. The neat thing about the processing step is the software can determine where the photos were taken from. As you saw, it shows the images floating in the air and oriented correctly. So that's incredible. It's all built in the geometry and the difference of the imagery. So now let's apply this amazing technology to some extremely flat areas that I've imaged before in infrared. And specifically, let's look at Michigan. Here's the flight path, the red line. I flew from Chicago to Buffalo this spring, and I was looking towards the north, and I took some really clear images, as you see right here. This area is usually covered in clouds, but this on this particular day, the western side was clear, as you can see here, and we can almost see Lake Michigan on the left, curving around way out there. So we're really seeing about, you know, over 200 miles out. But let's use this photogrammetry to determine the flatness. Is it really as flat as it appears? So here I've imported all the images, and I already ran the first step, which determines the location of the images and creates the sparse tie points. Looks like about 7,000 or so points, and we can rotate and look at it. So the software probably looks at the prominent you know, features in the image and creates this sparse dense cloud, and then the following steps are more involved. But here we can see the cloud layer above it. You see that? There's ground points and then there's a cloud layer, and look how flat it is. It's incredible. So now let's run the next step here. So we'll go with high. There's a few setting options there. We'll just leave it on the default, and we'll be generating the depth map, and it's gonna take a while, so I'm just gonna skip ahead here. Okay, so the processing is done, and now we have this dense cloud to work with. Wow, look at that. Whoa, you can even see the clouds. Now there's an artifact underneath it, right, the black thing. But by and large, all the data points seem to be accurate. And it even picks up the clouds. That is so cool. Yet look how flat that is. Wow, that's incredible. But look at that. Look how flat that is. Oh my goodness. That is incredible, folks. Yeah, look at that. See? It is pretty flat. Now, don't worry, we're going to do a little bit more analysis here. But this is just a visual to get us all excited, because this is really incredible, you know, technology, you know. Before I was trying to determine land features. You look out there and you see something and you say, hey, you know, there's some feature out there and then use Google Earth to try to determine what I'm seeing. Now here, with this technique, the software probably does a correlation across the whole image or pairs of images and determines, you know, points which are the same. So because we're in motion, right, things move differently in the image, and that's a powerful technique. You can now determine based on movement what is close and what is far. So here's one of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh image. Actually, they're numbered the other way because I was flying from left to right. And so yeah, I had a good spread of images here, and he created quite a detailed map. Now there's one more step here that I haven't done. That's where he creates tetrahedra. I can barely say that word. So what we're looking at here is just a dense point cloud, and I don't know, there's a lot of points there, as you can see on the left. So let's go back to the tide points, because that had more information, and we could see the clouds in the distance, which are not here. So that's what I'm interested in. So here I'm looking at the tide points, the less dense data set, and we can see as I rotate it, I'm not sure if you can see it on your screen, there is points out there at a different height, right there. Those are the clouds in the distance, and the other points on the bottom, that's the ground. You know, now if we go to the dense cloud, look at that. You see, it's only a portion of it, very close in, so it doesn't take all the points from far away, because the angles are too shallow, and you cannot, you know, do accurate processing. I probably have to study the different options and parameters that will let the software kind of extend the analysis. But let's go back to the tide points. Okay, and I'm going to rotate it. And look at those clouds there in the distance. Isn't that incredible? Wow. And now look at that, see? So there's more data out there that we need to look at. And now I'm turning it sideways. And you'll see a detailed analysis. Now let's move it to the right a little bit to fit everything in there. And those blue things are the image location, obviously. So now when I rotate it on edge, it becomes apparent that there's a difference between the clouds and the ground. Isn't that incredible? Oh my God, that's incredible. And see, the dense cloud is only close in, so it discards a lot of information on there. Wow, that is incredible. Look at that. Wow, this is amazing. So I'm going to do an analysis based on that, on this dense cloud. So let's create a line and match it to the ground points. Here we go. Here's the clouds on top, and down on the bottom we have the ground points. There we go. Right there. Let's move it a little bit. That looks about right. Let's zoom in a little bit. You see the ground points? Yeah, right there. Right there. Man, this is so flat. Oh my God. Look at that. This is incredible. So now, let's see, what am I doing here? So there's the clouds, right? Those are data points from the clouds in the distance. So it's quite a distance here. Okay. So now let's create another line to approximate the curvature. You know, we're probably seeing, I don't know, 200-300 miles. So I've calculated roughly how much you should curve. So I'll show you an analysis slowly, but right now I'm just kind of putting up a curve here, and I'm gonna bend it slightly. So see, there's an angle of about 2 degrees in 300 miles. You know, there's a curvature of about 2 to 3 degrees. So I'm just bending this right now. Oh yeah, that's what I was doing, yeah. So here we have a visual of kind of the curvature of the Earth, the supposed curvature, and then the data points extracted from photogrammetry. And it's quite a shocker. I mean, it is extremely flat, you know. Our eyesight is not deceiving us. That's incredible, folks. This is amazing. And we'll do another analysis shortly, but here, let me move the curve down a little bit. And so while I was looking at this, I realized, wait a second, I can determine how far I'm seeing based on the altitude of my photos, which are shown in the model. I know I was flying at 32,000 feet. Now here's the incredible result, folks. Shocking. By using the altitude of the images as a reference, I calculated that I'm seeing data points out over 500 miles, folks. This is just incredible. You see on the left, I'm flying at 32,000 feet. And I've determined the center of the images and the vector there. And now I have a reference height on the image. And then I've taken that and I measured horizontally. And look at that. My goodness. Wow. We can go, there's data points even beyond 540, maybe 600 miles out. Now you can see the clouds, you can see the ground there. And I've also placed the curved Earth. I've calculated that to be accurate. And look at that. That is incredible, folks. Just amazing. I mean, what can we say? You know, the Earth is absolutely flat. It just boggles the mind. So,
and they're always over water. So and they're always over water. So you can lie about refractive effects to people who have no idea how refraction works. Fraction work.
Incredibly simple, but point us to profound truth. But point us to
Mick West and his nonsense standard refraction. But Mick West, you know, he couldn't resist but come into the comments section on that video that we released this week, and you know, make these completely nonsense arguments. And get this, guys, the comical part about it is when you look at his arguments, he starts posting videos, right, that are demonstrating refraction. And I'm like, dude, nobody is disputing the idea that refraction exists. What we're disputing is, first of all, the fact that you are doing your math and your calculations based on a flat Earth. And it's not a flat Earth, because when you start getting away from that point of origin, the atmosphere gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And I said, and I also find it ironic that the demonstrations that Mick sent me, you know, that you sent me, Mick, were little refraction demonstrations on a flat surface. It's like, what's the matter? Can't you do it on a convex surface? Can't you give us something like we would actually see, you know, if the Earth was curved?
Fraction work.
No, he tries to minimalize it. It's like, yeah, we mentioned a lot of reasons in the video why 7.6R or standard refractions is BS, right? But he never, of course, not once does he ever address the fact that, you know, as you go away from that target, that the Earth is dropping away from that laser beam, and therefore, you know, it demands then that the atmosphere becomes thinner and thinner and thinner the further that you look out. And that is exactly the opposite of what they're saying, you know, when they say that the refraction is happening because you're looking through this ever-increasing dense atmosphere. Now, in a flat Earth model, that's absolutely true. But it totally changes the game when you put it on a ball. So
fraction work. But it's like that. In fact, when you start looking, we have all this situation. I always show this few image, and I incorporate the cup of glass of Sharon for the next video. But we can see this kind of distortions, which is based on the angular resolution. We can see, you know, at home experiments or lab experiments situations when, if you are leading with really dense atmospheres, your image is going down. It's no way to look around. I know anytime you have more index of refraction, because the light, you know, is slowing down, you're going to have the downward situation. And when you're looking at superior mirage, you never going to have it on the horizon line. It's no way to that happen. Never. All the time it's going to be, and this is on the lab. It's happened on the live. It's happened on the, homemade videos. And I explained a few times this situation based on the butane gas. But let me just, get a little forward to see. We all see this kind of phenomenon. For example, this is from the movie, and I show a few weeks ago, but here you can clearly see what happened with perspective. And here you can really see how these buildings are just disappear because they are in front of that dense atmosphere. And of course, if you go just a little up, because the camera is just rising up like 20 meters, you can clearly see the building again. So this is what is happening. This is why the objects are cutting off. It's just standard refraction. Yeah, it's a standard refraction, but it's not rising up. It's cutting the bottom.
Yeah, well, again, standard refraction. Let's just say that on this particular day, there was a high degree of refraction. The parameters of what would have been shown, had the refraction been a little bit less, would have made that what we're observing a little less severe. But I mean, I really want to get away from that idea of standard refraction and call it what it is more likely should be called, and that would be heavy refraction or a high degree of refraction.
Yeah, that is nice. That is a nice way to call it, because it's highest or lower or low, high or low refraction.
Refraction work.
And by the way, I love this graphic. I don't know who put this. Oh, Jaron put this in the chat. And this is something that's really amazing. You know, you fill up a glass with water, and the refraction literally changes the direction of the arrow. And this is something that Mike Kavanaugh and Steve Torrance and Dr. Zach have been talking about for quite some time. You know, this refractive, well, several people, I won't just credit to them, but several people have been looking at this, about these refractive properties of the atmosphere. In other words, the sun, the moon, the stars, what we perceive as their position is really just an apparent position, because our atmosphere acts just like liquid. In fact, it's classified as a liquid. And its refractive properties essentially give us an entire lens effect, just like water does. Almost really no difference whatsoever. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And isn't it crazy that the reason that we say that the Earth is curved like a ball is because these surveyors go out and measure the horizon in the distance and see that it drops. But we're looking right here, we see that this arrow drops. So that means that anything going through a medium is going to drop, which means the horizon going through, when we're looking through air, is going to drop, which if you measure that and call it a curve, just think of it as the opposite way. If it was the opposite way, that going through mediums caused it to rise, then we would think we were on the inside of a ball. That's how ridiculous it is. But we know there's nobody above us upside down, just as we know there's nobody below us upside down. So we're smart enough to say the Earth is not a ball. But no, these guys, they're going to go ahead and, even though they have evidence right here that the horizon drops due to the medium, they're going to just look through telescopes, see the horizon drop, measure it, and say that's the Earth curving. Crazy.
Exactly. And notice, you know, and this goes right along with what I was saying earlier. When you change the viscosity of the atmosphere or your medium, it will pull things down. And that's exactly what we're witnessing here. And that can be done by either adding humidity or reducing the temperature, which increases density altitude, which means that it essentially brings it into a heavier, lower altitude, you know, produced by the temperature, which gives us a more dense atmosphere. There it is, folks, looking right at you, right in the face.
Refraction work.
You are a surveyor, and you are, I believe, a plane surveyor, right? Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in comparison, as far as numbers of actual surveyors on the ground out there surveying the world as we know it, would you say the great majority of the surveyors out there are actually plane surveyors, or would they be geodetic surveyors? And if it's plane surveyors, how many more plane surveyors are there than geodetic surveyors?
I would say that there's probably quite a bit more plane surveyors than geodetic surveyors, because geodetic surveyors are basically what sets up the WGS 84 and state plane coordinate system. They're the ones that come up with that mathematical construct.
Right, that nobody can see in the WGS 84. And the reason I ask this is because I'm sitting here watching the chat, and we have one of our favorite trolls, Charlie, in the chat, and you know, he's making a comment back to Antonio where he says, Antonio, perhaps so. Is this surveyor a specialist in geodetic surveying or plane surveying? If the latter, no real point. In other words, what he's doing, he's just saying, oh, plane surveyors, we're just going to discount them. They mean nothing. They're completely irrelevant to this you know, discussion. And you know, to that, I say that is about the most idiotic statement I have ever heard in my life, especially when you have the majority of plane surveyors out there that are really doing the work, really doing the actual you know, differential leveling and equations and stuff like that. I just can't believe some of the statements that come out as a result of cognitive dissonance or trying to push a model that they're being paid to push out of some of these trolls. So I just wanted to ask that question because I suspected that there were probably a ton more plane surveyors than geodetic surveyors.
Yeah, and something else I'll add in is I've been thinking about this. It's kind of like, you know, if you were putting like a tile floor in your bathroom or your living room where you have 1 foot squares and then you put them side by side by side by side and you have a flat level floor. Basically, that's the same as plane surveying. We survey out a mile by mile area, and the next area next to it isn't any different than the one next to it, the one next to it, the one next to it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question for you, Chris?
Sure.
Okay, so do you use like a theodolite when you do this?
Yes.
Okay, and
theodolite and GPS.
Okay, and do the theodolites, do they still use a convex lens?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, because I was just having this sort of argument again in chat the other day with somebody who you know, comes up as a surveyor. They say they see, if I can share my screen real quick, that'd be awesome. It'll just take a second.
Yeah, hang on just a second, John. Let me prep that.
Okay. And
Charlie,
so,
in the meantime, he's saying a plane surveyor does not measure the shape of the Earth. That is not their job. They set things up on a plane. Like, oh, wow, this is what we're discussing. That they set things up on a plane because this is a plane. The other guys are just theoretical. This dude doesn't. Yeah.
Well, it's what he's paid to do, Antonio. Everybody knows Charlie's a troll. Everybody knows Charlie's paid to do this. So, Charlie, you got to understand, you're not convincing anybody of anything. People just kind of look at you for comedy relief because nobody's really buying what you're saying. So, but anyway, knock yourself out. Go ahead, John. You're ready to screen share.
Okay, so this was an argument that I think was very well done way back in the 1800s in Zetetic, and I had assumed for this whole time correctly, because I did look into it, and I just assumed that 2017 was no different than 2 years ago in a sense that theodolites use convex lenses. And so and this is even what Robotham was arguing, even testing the equipment, is that if you level out your theodolite, because of refraction in the convex lens, you get this sort of apparent drop of the horizon line, only through the lens, of course, compared to whatever you're leveling crosshairs or whatever that true level is. That is due to the refraction of the convex lens, has nothing to do with the curve of the Earth, and yet there are still surveyors that are making this argument. So if you've got a theodolite that's leveled out to the ground, so you know that the thing's level and it's facing the horizon, which you know is a certain distance based on your elevation, what surveyors are seeing is the horizon apparently drop a little bit. This is probably exaggerated to show the point, but the surveyors are seeing the horizon drop a little bit compared to the level, which is indicated by these crosshairs, but only through the lens. And so I just thought maybe you could comment on that and its accuracy, because I always thought it was a fabulous argument from Robotham, not ever me personally using a theodolite. So just your thoughts on it, maybe.
I've kind of expressed this quite a few times that let's see, how would I, if you're just slightly off level, let's say that it's 100th of a foot off level where you're standing. So the further you project that out, the bigger the gap is going to be. So I don't think, in my own personal opinion, that a theodolite is accurate enough to do the measurements that they're doing, the geodesists. And then I believe that geodesists kind of fall in the same category with astrophysicists. They're handed their mathematics and they go out and they make observations, and their math concludes that there's actual Earth curvature through their math.
Right. Yeah, that rings true with me. And, that makes a lot of sense why you would have surveyors coming out and saying, well, we know the Earth isn't flat because of this or, whatever reasons. But, they are slaves to their own hypothetical numbers, slaves to the construct, because they can't think outside of the box to say, well, what if the Earth's flat and this is just refraction, right? So.
Right, or heat waves. Heat waves take a lot of it, because all the transits are focused out to infinity.
Right, okay.
So it's not like a zoom lens on a camera where you can bring in from 200 millimeters to 500 millimeters. They're focused to infinity, and when that happens, you bring in all that atmospheric distortion.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
Interesting. Okay, great. Thanks, Chris.
I think it's even, and I don't know if this is the best time to bring it up, but there is a large issue that I think is going to come up in the future, and people probably should start looking into it. But kind of what you're describing here, John, and it's also from Robotham, when the Bedford level experiment didn't go as planned for Hampton, that was because when you looked out from the bridge and you had these, let's say these poles at 10 feet high off the water tops, the reason he lost the so-called bet was because in the telescope, those poles fell down in the distance. And they called that the curvature of the Earth. And then Robotham came back and stated, and this is one when I've told people, they're like, what are you talking about? That if you line up a telescope and level it from your position and then aim it, or, it's leveled and it's hitting the top of those 10-foot poles, that those poles will fall down in the eyepiece of the telescope. And people will say that that's the curvature of the Earth. And what Robotham was saying is it is not. You need to actually tilt the telescope to hit the first and second pole, the tops of each. And then if that line stays even with the telescope or the telephone poles all the way down, then the Earth is flat. This is the whole thing that got the Bedford level experiment on a crazy one. I was trying to explain it on Raw last week, and Missa was kind of in a place where she was starting to see the whole idea of the Earth being curved by that experiment. What I eventually had to do to get her to see it is I said, imagine you put a telescope level up on top of a cloud. Okay, so we know that the clouds in the distance go down to the horizon, but that telescope placed on top of a cloud above your head, if it was level, would shoot out into space. It would not follow the clouds as they go down to the horizon. That's a much bigger example, or a much wider kind of metaphor, but really that's the same thing as us on the ground. That's why theodolites measure drop, is because you're looking through a telescope and items I don't want to say in reality, but to us, they get smaller as they go towards the horizon. Well, a telescope cannot, the same thing doesn't happen to a telescope, because just like in your picture here, all the telescope sees is this circle, right? That's all it sees. It can only go into that circle and come out of that circle. It doesn't see anything more than that. And so if you had poles going down all the way to the horizon, it drops per the crosshairs, kind of like you're showing here. It's a combination of both. But I think that that's going to come up, and that's why I wanted to do my experiment by the lake, because it's going to show when we shoot the laser through and hit the wood planks versus when we send the theodolite through, that the theodolite will eventually, in my opinion, see wood, because it's going to show a drop, but it's not a drop.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point, Darren. And you can do the same thing with a camera. If you set up a camera and if you pick out something far off in the distance and you start zooming in, you have to pull the camera down to bring that back into the picture.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And Chris, real quick, our guest last week basically made a suggestion, a request, if you could describe a little bit about what the theodolite does and how it works, just for the benefit of the audience.
Basically, it's just a telescope with crosshairs in it, set up with now that it's all digital. The levels within is all digital. But basically, you have a level bubble that's in both directions, so that you can level it perfectly in all directions. Basically, it's just a telescope with crosshairs built into it.
Okay.
And I will say, throughout the years here, in the last 7 or 8 years, the equipment and the theodolites they're giving us, it's you used to be able, with the older stuff, you could go 1.5 miles, 2 miles if you didn't have lots of heat waves. This newer equipment, we can't go more than like 1,400 feet with the optics and they have degraded the instrumentation that we're using.
Wow, really? That's pretty counterintuitive.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
And one other thing that I'd like you to clarify, Chris, because this is something that it amazes me that people make this mistake, but I'll just make the statement and you tell me if I am correct or not. Theodolites do not measure curvature. They do not measure arc. They measure slope, and then from that resulting slope measurements, you use your trigonometry to then calculate your elevations. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, that's spot on.
Do you use GPS as well?
Yes, I use GPS whenever we do really long projects, or we want to go out and shoot maybe like I was on a big project that was 60 miles long. We use GPS because you can go 60, 70, 100, 200 miles with GPS over long distances. Really quick measurements with GPS.
Yeah, and Chris also has some really interesting stories about what he's found out about GPS by some of the people that he's talked to in the field, but maybe if we have time, we can go over that a little bit. But every time Chris comes over, he's always telling me some really interesting stories that he finds out. And of course, these are the experiences that he has that are part of many experiences and tests and measurements and stuff that has built his preponderance of evidence, and the reason why he calls himself a flat earther. So, like I said, guys, we don't come to these realizations or these conclusions about the shape of what we're actually standing on just arbitrarily. It usually takes several things. It's a composite, a preponderance of many things. So that's how it's done. But man, that looks like an old-timey one. Is that a really old one, Chris? Or that doesn't look like anything I normally see the surveyors using.
Yes, that's extremely old. Like I said, the ones we have nowadays, all you have is your eyepiece, you level it up, and basically it's just a telescope with crosshairs in it that are extremely accurate.
All right.
Are you talking about an electronic one? Does he have an electronic one or just a non-electronic one?
Yeah, the one that I use is actually robotic. Nowadays, you used to have somebody standing behind it to turn angles and stuff, and nowadays it's all robotic. It communicates with radios and laser lights. You don't even have to have anybody standing behind him anymore. You can go out by yourself and do all the work.
Yeah. And Chris, you've been doing this for 30 plus years, is that correct?
Yeah, right around 30 years.
Oh, there you go. I'd call that a veteran, for sure.
And then just something else I wanted to throw in. When I first started looking into flat Earth, I went into the office with everybody sitting there one day, and I asked everybody, what is the equation for calculating the curvature of the Earth? And everybody looked at me like a deer in the headlight. Nobody could answer the question, and I think that says volumes about not using the equation for Earth's curvature for anything that we do.
I don't doubt that a bit because, as I told you, I used to build point-to-point microwave systems all across the country. And, I was a field engineer actually out there in the trenches building them. And, we had calculations for Fresnel zones, for, date and backup, redundant receivers in case you got any path fade, anything like that. But again, when you're doing it, you don't ever think about the curvature there, even though it is plotted out, guys. So don't hit me with that. I am aware of it. It is plotted out. But, when you're actually in the field and doing the field engineering, it seems logical to you because we're always either on the highest ridge on a plane or, we have the shot taking place from a mountaintop or whatever. So you automatically think that that's the thing that's going to get you over any obstruction. But I have to tell you that I never, ever, ever knew about the 8 inches per mile curvature, or even the Sagitta, or anything like that, that involve dealing directly with the mathematics of the curvature of the Earth. So that just goes to show you that, regardless of the fact you're working in the field and are actually, a professional in it, there are just some things that you simply accept on face value because you were told so, and the fact that, well, it's working, right? So why would you ever want to question it? So I sympathize with your other surveyors that they don't understand that, and I'm sure you probably were never really taught that either, were you, when you were first learning about it?
Absolutely not. It was never mentioned in all the years that I surveyed.
Yeah. So
the only time it comes up is when we're working in the state plane coordinate system, and basically all they're doing in the state plane coordinate system is scaling distances up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, that just goes to show you, and this is what we were talking about earlier. This is the education system for you, because they teach you what you need to know. Pretty much bare minimum, because they certainly don't want to give you any more information than what you could possibly use on whatever career you're doing, because heaven forbid you figure out something else that they don't want you to know about.
Hey, what's up, Chris?
Hey.
Say what's up, man. Your name's Chris. You're a flat earther. You're a land surveyor and a pilot, correct?
Absolutely. And the Earth is flat.
Yeah, that's true.
Fraction work.
Present equations hold for any altitude. Everybody see that? I don't have time to read all of it. Present equations hold for any altitude. All right, let's see what they're talking about. Table of contents, introduction, validity of flat Earth assumption for atmospheric calculations. Validity. You know what validity means? Something that is a solid fact. Let me back up. Remember, present equations hold for any altitude. So talking about this study of basic atmospheric equations, this is for any altitude. This is the introduction. This is the table of contents, introduction, the validity of flat Earth assumption for atmospheric calculations. If it wasn't flat, if the Earth was not flat, why would you start off a classified, under threat of law in the Espionage Act, why would you classify that? It's all here, folks. Introduction here says a comprehensive study of atmospheric refraction errors for optical instrumentation. What is it based on? Based on a flat Earth assumption, will be published subsequently. The relative mass of the atmosphere at any elevation angle is given approximately by the cosine of the elevation angle. I may be pronouncing some of this wrong, but listen, this relationship is correct for a flat Earth and a flat atmosphere. This relationship is correct for a flat Earth and a flat atmosphere. And they're going to publish these results. So we just saw one document say, this is the correct underlying physics, flat non-rotating Earth. We see this document right here say, this is correct for any altitude.
Conclude this point by saying that you've accepted that it's based on an assumption. Do you still maintain that position?
Well, it's the standard model.
Sorry, the standard model has no scientific backing. It is an assumption, correct?
Well, it's the standard model.
Sorry, the standard model has no scientific evidence. You only assume a value of R. Correct, Mick? For crying out loud, man.
Yeah.
Comprehensive study of atmospheric refraction errors for optical instrumentation. What is it based on? Based on a flat Earth assumption, will be published subsequently.
You only assume a value of R. Correct, Mick? For crying out loud, man.
Yeah.
But it gets better. He says that to study the near-sun halo and also the sun on the surface perpendicular to these rays. The dissertation contains a certain formula of the brightness of the sky, taking into consideration only the brightness of the first order, derived on the assumption of a flat Earth and giving some conclusions. Because remember, they're trying to study how light is operating within the atmosphere with a near-sun halo, and they tell you over flat Earth. This is a Russian document, 1957.
Fraction work.
Yes, the fact is that the light will only bend as it goes into a denser medium, and that will bend it down or one direction only, however you want to look at that. And so this is what I was referring to essentially, is that...
So it would self-correct and return to normal when you approach the less dense medium is kind of what I see what you mean.
Right, only with respect to, where it was before.
Incredibly simple, but point us to profound truth.
I especially love this one because it included a husband and wife research team, exemplifying what true independent science should be. I truly lament the fact that mainstream science has devolved from the pursuit of truth into a phony, faith-based atheistic religion founded on diktat, top-down conformity, control, worthless degrees, and ridiculous theories devoid of experimentation, the scientific method, objectivity, observation, and common sense. But that's why we're here. We need to change all of that. And only the grassroots flat earth scientific revolution can do that, in my opinion. Now, these flat earth tests I'm going to present here today are fantastic and should cause any thinking, reasonable person to clearly see that the globe does not match our reality. Before I get into the evidence, this is my email address. Please email me if you would also like to share your genuine flat earth experiments, observations, videos, or your professional experiences regarding the flat earth. If they're good and I have the time, I'll try to share them with others. I don't make any money from my channel, and I have nothing to sell you whatsoever. I'm only here to share the truth to the best of my ability and build friendships with those few people who still love truth, regardless of its popularity. But let's get to those several amazing flat earth tests proving the earth is demonstrably flat. The first test we're going to look at was at Okanagan Lake in British Columbia, Canada. The laser and the high zoom camera were separated by a whopping distance of 16.4 miles. The laser was at 4 feet above the water, and the Nikon camera was set at 2 feet above the water. But there is also some cell phone footage of the laser at just inches above the water that I'll share in a bit. This is how the laser and the camera were set up far across from each other. I have the coordinates for the laser and the camera listed here, and the distance between the 2 points was 16.42 miles. At a laser height of 4 feet and a distance of 16.42 miles, according to their globe math, the observer would have to be at an amazing 130 feet above the water to see the source of the laser, because the curvature of the Earth should be blocking his view, but it's not. In other words, you'd have to be at least as high as this 130-foot statue to see the source of the laser if we truly lived on a globe. Instead, the camera gets as low as inches above the water, and the source of the laser is still visible. Let's watch the footage of the laser, 16.42 miles away, and I'll also include the cell phone footage, synchronized with the Nikon footage.
Okay, you're right. Oh yeah, yeah, flash. Flash, oh, almost right on. Can you put it on steady? Oh, right in the camera. To your right a little bit. Oh, flash right there, yeah. Back left. Oh, flash, yeah, oh, dude. You're nailing it. Back to your right. Okay, to your left. You're coming around. Left, left, left. Here it comes. Down a bit. Boom. Can you keep it there?
Yeah, leave it there.
So how high are you off the water?
4 feet.
Yeah, I'm 2.5 feet here. So can you keep playing around? Like I can see the laser, just see if you can get it back and forth and get it right in my camera. Oh, yeah, there. I gotta see how low I can get the cell phone down on the ground. See how I can see. Yeah.
Okay, I got the cell phone at the laser and I'm 1 foot off the water, 6 inches off the water. Jesus. Yeah, 3 inches off the water. Cell phone, hand touching the water.
And yeah, pretty good, bud. Yeah. Just give me a few more flashes and then we'll call it a night.
Okay, you just all just go back and forth, left and right?
Yeah, it's like I could tell you. Down a bit, down.
Did you see how the laser was visible by the cell phone only inches above the water? Under the globe model, he would have to be 130 feet above the water to see that laser. Without question, this lake is 100% flat, and that's impossible under the globe. Globe busted. Now let's take a look at the 10.4 mile test, because the footage is fantastic. In this case, they went to a different lake called Slocan Lake, about 100 miles away from Okanagan Lake. This is where Lee is joined by his supportive and wonderful wife, who is holding the flashlight. Even at 10.4 miles and a flashlight height of 6 inches, the curvature of the Earth should still hide 61 feet. But there isn't anything hidden. Let's watch.
Yeah, I can still see the light. It's crazy.
Okay, Lee, can you still see it?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, now we are, actually I'd say we're half a foot above the water.
Perfect.
Hey, Mom.
Okay.
Yeah? You know the like kind of clam thingies we have?
Okay, we're gonna zoom
I
out.
found a piece of one on the beach.
Awesome. Hey, listen, I don't want to run our battery down, Lee.
Don't worry about it, Evan. We're almost done.
And this is where we are. We'll look around. And there we go.
After the flashlight test, they pulled out the laser. I enjoy this one because the reflection of the laser is on the water. Another impossibility on an alleged curved surface.
Okay, stop. God, you've been flashing me. You're almost blinding me. Get right there. Right there.
That's it, buddy.
That's it. I got both cameras going. Yeah, you're hitting it right on.
All right, I'm gonna put on strobe.
Ten-4. I copy the strobe. I didn't copy that.
That was awesome. Finally, I'm going to show you one more test that Lee just performed a few days ago at the same 10.4 mile location. This time, the laser is at a mere 1 foot above the water, meaning 57 feet should be hidden behind the curvature. In this next video, Lee has the camera here at 1.5 feet. Look closely. Do you think that he's filming a mirage of a laser that's actually hidden behind the curvature of the Earth? Or does Lee have a direct line of sight to the laser? It's obvious that is not a mirage. That is a direct line of sight to the laser source. Now he sets the camera to just inches above the water.
This is with the camera resting right on top of the rocks.
Now that is your flat Earth reality right there. No question about it.
Fraction work.
If the lake is flat, the laser beam and the water will always be parallel to each other. Seen from a boat, the beam would always stay at the same height above the water, no matter how far you travel into the lake. But does that happen?
Fraction work.
Because I want to hear a valid reason why this experiment that we're watching right here, and it's on our channel, anybody can go and look at it and read the comments. It's called the 7.5 mile flat Earth laser test on a frozen lake. It was obviously very cold, likely below zero. And like I said, the things you have to consider here is that density altitude was likely identical on each side of the lake. The fact that it was below freezing tells you that the moisture component has been frozen out of the air, crystallized and dropped to the ground, point blank. And the fact that he was able to track with that laser beam all the way across the lake, all 8 miles or 7.5 miles across the lake, tells you that, refraction must be absolutely miracle working, for it to be able to do that, except the fact that refraction couldn't be happening because you have identical density altitude on each side of the lake. It's kind of like if you shine a light through a glass of water. If you go on one side, and the water is essentially the same temperature, it's going to go straight across. Whereas if you start the light from above it, right, then it's going to hit that denser water and it's going to refract and kick it off to the side. Well, I'm saying that condition simply would not exist over a lake that's frozen, in the middle of the night. Not going to happen. And if it is, I'd like to see examples of it and also why this would invalidate the test. So, I really think that, and the same thing goes for, anybody that's looking at, this is kind of the same principle about lighthouses, right? Well, it gets pretty darn cold at sea at night, right? And yet the lighthouses can be seen hundreds of miles away. And yes, sometimes the temperature is going to be above freezing. And yes, there could be then refraction in there. But on the cold winter's night, let's face it, especially over the ocean, the temperature is pretty flippin' cold. And, refraction just simply does not explain why people can see lighthouses from hundreds of miles away. It just doesn't follow. So again, this is my question to all you ballers and all you physicists out there. I truly, honestly want to know why this experiment would be invalidated, and what role refraction would ever play in this.
Researchers such as D. Marble, Flat Earth Perth, and many others have observed laser beams over distances of 9 miles or greater. A common response to attempt to discredit the observations is the word divergence.
Fraction work.
Yes, just the word divergence.
Fraction work.
Like it meant something. No explanation, no application of the concept, just the word, as if stating it was all that was required. This short video will present the concept of divergence so the term can be understood, which will hopefully prevent its incorrect use. What is beam divergence? The beam divergence of an electromagnetic beam is an angular measure of the increase in beam diameter or radius with distance from the optical aperture, or antenna aperture, from which the electromagnetic beam emerges. Most lasers used in pointers and light shows emit beams with a Gaussian profile or distribution. Gaussian distribution, also known as normal distribution, is a bell-shaped curve. This means that these laser beams are brightest in the center and the intensity falls off towards the edges. Why does a laser beam diverge? Below is only a very simplified description of why beam divergence occurs, but is adequate in the context of the observations being done with lasers. An ideal or perfect laser does not exist. An ideal laser would emit light in only one specific direction. Example, 90 degrees relative to the light generating mechanism, so no beam divergence would occur. In real-life lasers, the light is being emitted in a range of directions relative to the light generating mechanism. Due to the size of the light compared to the physical size of the light generating mechanism and lenses, a proportion of the light generated will be able to leave the final lens at a non-90 degree angle, causing a beam to be generated that diverges, or not just travels in one specific direction. How is beam divergence calculated? The beam divergence of a laser beam is a measure for how fast the beam expands outward from the beam waist. Like all electromagnetic beams, lasers are subject to divergence, which is measured in milliradians, emrads, or degrees. The divergence of a laser beam can be calculated if the beam diameter d1 and d2 at two separate distances, such as z1 and z2, along the laser axis are known. If the increase in beam diameter between 2 points is measured, and the distance between the 2 points is also known, then a mathematical calculation can be applied to work out the angle of divergence, which is measured again in milliradians, or emrads. Once the angle of divergence is known, the divergence of the beam at any distance can be calculated. An example. A laser has a beam divergence of 1.5 emrad, or 0.086 degrees. This means for every 1 meter of travel, the beam diverges by 1.5 millimeters. What is the radius of the beam at 1,000 meters? You can calculate it this way. So make the diameter 3 meters. The beam at 100 meters has a radius from the center of the beam of 1.5 meters and a diameter of 3 meters. A simple plug in the numbers beam divergence calculator can be found at the following URL, which also will be in the show description. Example, 10,000 milliwatt 520 nanometer green laser, 303 model. Using the divergence calculator and double checking the maths using the tan function, at 15,300 meters the beam diameter is 22.95 meters and the radius is 11.48 meters. At 15,300 meters the beam area is 413.74 square meters. Summary. A laser beam diverges. The divergence of a laser beam can be calculated. The radius, diameter, and surface area of the diverged beam can be calculated at a specific distance. In the peer-to-peer observations, a red laser and a green laser were used. The red laser is 650 nanometers. The green laser is 520 nanometers. The diverging beam of the green laser is more visible compared to the red laser for two reasons. 1. The molecules of the air scatter green light more effectively than red light. And 2. The human eye is more sensitive to green light compared to red light. The diverging green laser positioned at Worthing, 15.3 kilometers away, can be clearly seen due to the fact that green light is scattered by the molecules of the atmosphere and because the human eye is most sensitive to green light. What exactly is scattering? If the light of the beam is not traveling directly into the observer's eye, then how can the beam be seen? What exactly is scattering? Some of the green light is reflected in all directions off the air particles. One of the air particles is represented by the blue dot, not to scale. Some of the reflected green light enters the person's eye, and the diverging beam is observed. Note, the light is actually scattered 360 degrees. Decrease in light intensity. As can be seen, the light intensity of the diverging beam decreases with distance from the source and with distance from the central path of the beam. A laser beam diverges, spreads out, as it travels. A number of responses to laser experiments that have been carried out over water in which the intense source of the laser could be seen have been, you can see the laser because of divergence. Next, we shall see how a diverging laser beam will be affected at sea level on a globe model. Note, the mathematical numbers that are presented are the best that can be used in the situation. The fact that the radius of the Earth in the sphere model is 6,371 kilometers, this should limit the overall accuracy of the numbers to the closest 1 meter. Numbers ranging from thousands of kilometers to meters are being used, and this range limits the accuracy. Despite this, the numbers will be used as fairly as possible to represent the concept being presented. Based on the assumption that the Earth is a sphere and has a radius of 6,371 kilometers, the horizon is 3.57 kilometers from the observer. The green line represents the laser beam between the observer and the horizon. The laser beam is traveling horizontal to the sea surface, and the observer's position, angles A, B, and C, will be calculated. An isosceles triangle can be drawn from the center of the Earth to the surface. Here are the degrees of each of the angles. Next, the height of the central laser beam above the horizon at 3.57 kilometers will be calculated. Note, the laser itself is 1 meter above tide level, will also need to be taken into account. An isosceles triangle can be drawn from the center of the Earth to the surface. Again, here are the angles in degrees. Next, the triangle involving the laser beam will be calculated. Laser traveling horizontal to tide level from the laser's starting position. It's been exaggerated and rotated to make it clearer to understand. Laser traveling horizontal to tide level from the laser's starting position. You can see 90.016 degrees, exaggerated again and rotated to make it clearer to understand. Now the other angles can be calculated. Now, 3 factors of the triangle are known. The other angles and lengths can be calculated. Side Z and side W. The central beam of the laser will be 1 meter above tide level at the horizon. That is 3.57 kilometers away from the laser. If positioned at tide level, the central beam of the laser will be 1 meter above the tide level at the horizon. That is 3.57 kilometers away from the laser due to the curvature. The laser was actually positioned 1 meter above tide level, so the central beam of the laser will be 2 meters above tide level at the horizon. That is 3.57 kilometers away from the laser. The laser is 1 meter above tide level. At 3.57 kilometers, the central beam of the laser is 1 meter above the tide level. At 3.57 kilometers, the central beam of the laser is in total 2 meters above the tide level. At 3.57 kilometers, the green laser beam has a radius of 2.68 meters. This means that the bottom 0.68 meters of the radius of the diverging beam is cut off by the sea. 25% of the lower radius of the diverging laser is cut off by the sea. 25% of the radius of the diverging laser is cut off by the sea. Area at 5.37 kilometers, 22.5 square meters. Radius at 5.37 kilometers, 2.68 meters. Here's a diagram showing the bottom of the diverging laser beam being cut off as it strikes the sea. At this point, the bottom part of the diverging beam strikes the sea. The bottom part of the diverging beam is no longer present further down the line. Obviously, the observer is never going to be able to see the laser source due to the curvature. When the diverging beam is cut off, the cut off part does not then start to diverge again. Why? Because divergence is caused due to the light generation mechanism and emittance of light from the laser device, not by light simply traveling through the air. Summary. A laser beam will continue to diverge as it travels. At the horizon, the bottom part of the diverging laser beam will be cut off by the sea. The laser beam, when cut off, does not diverge again. Now that we have an understanding of laser beam divergence, this part of the presentation is going to relate the concept to laser observations that have taken place. The peer-to-peer observation was carried out over the sea at a distance of 15 kilometers or 9.5 miles. According to the curved calculator, the intense central source of the laser beam should not have been observed. It obviously was. Could the camera have recorded the diverging part of the green laser beam and not the actual intense central source of the laser beam? This is what many people have suggested happened, although they have supplied no observations, model, or mathematics to support their assertion. This will be examined based on the observations and the curved calculator from metabunk.org. What is the size of the diverged laser beam at 15.3 kilometers or 9.5 miles? At 15,300 meters, the radius of the beam is 11.48 meters. But because the lower beam radius was cut off by the horizon at 3.57 kilometers to just 2 meters. After 15.3 kilometers or 9.5 miles, the lower radius is still 2 meters. According to the curve calculator, the observer, 1 meter above tide level, will not be able to observe the actual intense central source of the laser and will only be able to observe the less intense diverging beam rising at an angle. The diverging beam will be seen to be less intense as it is not being observed directly, but only because scattered light from the diverging beam is being observed by the camera. If the sea exhibited curvature, the observer would only be able to see the less intense diverging beam and not the central intense laser source. Due to curvature, the observer cannot see down the laser beam to the intense source at the end. The line of sight is blocked by the curvature. It would not be possible for an observer 1 meter above tide level, 15.3 kilometers or 9.5 miles away from the laser device 1 meter above tide level, to view the intense central beam according to the globe Earth model. This is what the mathematics of geometry prove. Summary. If the sea was curved, it would not be possible for an observer 1 meter above tide level to see the intense central beam of a laser 1 meter above tide level at a distance of 15.3 kilometers away. Based on the numbers generated from the curve calculator, the observer would only be able to observe the scattered light from the diverging beam. On the present globe model, it would not be possible to observe the intense source of the laser itself if it were 1 meter above tide level and 15.3 kilometers or 9.5 miles away. Only the scattered light from the diverging beam overhead would be observable, as illustrated by example in the picture above. But the intense source of the laser can be observed. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. The laser beam is traveling in an upward left direction toward the observer camera. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because green light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The laser beam is traveling in an upward right direction toward the observer camera. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because green light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. The laser beam is traveling in an upward left direction toward the observer camera. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because green light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. D-Marble's 10-mile Puget Sound laser test, the link will be in the description. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because blue light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. Flat Earth Perth 15-kilometer laser test, Mandurah. Again, the link will be in the description. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The laser device is being pointed upwards, preventing the intense source of the laser from being observed. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because blue light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The diverging beam is losing intensity rapidly with distance. The camera is picking up the diverging beam because blue light from the beam is scattering off the molecules of the air and entering the camera. The intense source can be seen with the beam divergence around it. Being able to view the intense source of a laser device over 9+ miles due to divergence of the beam is not possible on the globe Earth model, unless you are a science and maths denier. These observations are only possible at these distances because water does not exhibit the declared supposed curvature. Don't take my word for what is presented here. Do the observations and/or calculations.
It's obvious that is not a mirage. That is a direct line of sight to the laser source.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
When do you get to that point where enough is enough?
Oh, well, that's, it's over when, okay, I have like these psychosomatic, insomniatic manifestations of, well, here's the thing about me. I'm a product of my emotions.
So try this one on for size. Show me a picture of something over land that's 1,000 miles away. May I suggest the middle of the country where there's not much in the way? It's a straight shot after all, so what's the problem? Use a telescope. Pull Las Vegas into focus from Dallas, Texas. Isn't that where you have your little meeting? Maybe you should try doing something productive rather than blindly perpetuating the dumbest hoax on the internet.
I want you to think about the answer before you give it to me, okay?
Okay.
It's 1,000 miles away.
I want you to think about the answer.
I'm expecting our visibility tracker to show us very low visibility across Midway, Gary, Valparaiso, LaPorte, Rensselaer, and Kankakee, all less than a quarter of a mile within about an hour from now. Still some low visibility even up to the north where we have yet to have an advisory. Now,
I want you to think about the answer.
The main causes of obscuration in the atmosphere which lead to poor visibility are water droplets, which can either be suspended, such as cloud, mist or fog, or be falling as precipitation, for example as snow, rain or drizzle.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Alternatively, when solid particulates are present in the atmosphere, then the visibility will also be reduced. For example, dust, smoke or sand.
It's 1,000 miles away.
We can also have a combination of solid matter and water droplets, sometimes referred to as smog.
It's 1,000 miles away.
If we have stable conditions low down in the atmosphere, in other words, we have a temperature inversion, then there is a restriction on the vertical movement of air.
It's 1,000 miles away.
If we combine this with light winds, we have a situation which is commonly associated with poor visibility. This is because the particles causing the obscuration will have nowhere to escape to. In effect, the inversion acts like a lid.
It's 1,000 miles away.
They therefore become more concentrated beneath the inversion, reducing the METVIS at that level. We attach names and symbols to certain situations, depending on the cause of the poor vis. These are well known, but the strict definition is sometimes less well understood. Mist is a MET visibility of 1,000 metres or more.
It's 1,000 miles away.
With an upper limit usually of 5,000 metres, although this upper limit does vary occasionally. The relative humidity must be 95% or more as well. If the visibility is less than 1,000 metres, and the relative humidity is near 100%, we call this fog. Haze or smoke are caused by solid particulates, and so the humidity will be less than 95%, and is frequently in the order of 50 to 60%. Haze or smoke is reported with any visibility below 5,000 metres, when the humidity is not high enough to report mist or fog.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Let's now consider the visibility reducers in a little more detail, namely smoke, dust, sand, precipitation, and suspended water droplets. Smoke consists of solid particles produced by combustion. Conditions will be worse in a stable atmosphere.
It's 1,000 miles away.
And the reduction will depend on the rate of production, the rate of dispersal by the wind, and the distance from the source.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Dust is made up of fine particles, usually less than 0.08 millimetres across. Dust can be carried high into the troposphere, depending on the wind speed and stability. Sand consists of particles with a diameter of between 0.08 and 0.3 millimetres. Having a greater weight than dust, sand tends not to be lifted to great heights within the atmosphere. Dust and sandstorms can occur with the correct surface conditions.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Strong winds are required, usually in excess of 20 knots at the surface, and so they are more common through the day, due to the diurnal variation of wind.
It's 1,000 miles away.
The visibility in these phenomena is usually well below 1,000 metres. Examples are haboobs, and the khamsin. These solid particulates we have discussed have an affinity with water. They act as hygroscopic nuclei on which water vapour will condense. Smoke is particularly good at this, and so fog is also more likely to form when there is a smoke source in the vicinity, if the other necessary conditions are present.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Precipitation reduces the visibility whenever it occurs, but some types cause a greater reduction than others. The worst offender in this respect is snow, which can reduce the visibility very swiftly to the following values, depending on intensity: 50 to 200 metres in heavy snow, and around 1,000 metres in moderate snowfall. Blowing and drifting snow will also greatly reduce the visibility. The reduction of the Met visibility in rain will also depend upon its intensity. Typical Met visibility, as low as 1,000 metres or less, can occur in heavy rain.
It's 1,000 miles away.
With between 3,000 metres and 10 kilometres in moderate rain. Drizzle can reduce the visibility to a greater extent than rain, due to the large number of drizzle droplets present. Somewhere between 500 and 3,000 metres is not uncommon.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Probably the most important reduction of visibility is that caused by fog.
It's 1,000 miles away.
I want you to think about the answer.
All right, this is taken on 4th of July. I was on top of the little observation deck they got there. Now the water is really close to, I mean, it's very high tide, but the water is just underneath the observation deck itself. So that's about 3.5 feet to the observation deck, and then another 5 feet that my tripod is standing at. I did darken up the screen here a little bit, just basically because I had too much light on it to begin with, and you'll see it in the video. But I took a screenshot too of right in here somewhere, and I want to compare it to a different day when I was at right at 5 feet above the water. Actually, a year before this, well, actually, it was not really. It was 11/22, 2019. I got some really great visibility, and that's what this is really about, visibility. And as you can see here, I'm trying to get focus. It's a little windy too, so it's really kind of hard to get a good focus and be shaken, but you can see how this mirroring effect occurs, and this causes everything that you normally see on a good day of visibility to be pulled down, or what I like to say is magnified. Number one, it is magnified, and two, when this magnification occurs, it also with, I should say, magnification with mirroring, it causes the objects to look like they're being pulled down, but actually what it is the light is being diffracted upward, mirrored upward, and causing the bottom portions of things to be missing. Like right here, this is the Bayport rack. It should have 7 slots, and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots on it. That right there tells you that there's 2 slots missing. Is it below the curvature of Earth, or is this rack being magnified? I believe the rack is being magnified. It's only 2.5 miles away. The islands are 4.84 miles, 8.6 miles, something in there. So I should be able to see them openly and clear at this height, because I've got 2 extra feet above 6 feet, which should give me, approximately another maybe mile or so. But I'm still being cut off by this optical effect that occurs. Now, this is another observation that I make. I turn my camera around and point toward these 3 islands that are to the north of me. And where's my paper? I just had my paper here with all the names of it on here. One was Crawl Key, Saddle Key, and Sheephead Key. So Crawl Key is the farthest one to the left. That's at 6 miles. Saddle Key is the one in the middle. It's at about 5.5 miles. And then the Sheephead Key is at 4.6 miles. And you can hardly see them. And, if you kind of take their refraction and what would be cut off and put it towards this would be what you would see. You'd have this appearance of it being cut off, but it's not being cut off by curvature, folks. This is an optical effect that occurs not just over water, but also over land, because you'll get the same thing. You'll get the heat coming off the ground, you'll get evaporation rates, and this will cause this mirroring effect. Also, the sharp angles will cause this mirroring effect to block out the lower portions of any object, boat, land, any kind of, like I said, any object will appear to be getting cut off. Now you see, I'm going across here and I'm hardly seeing any of those islands. And even this boat, look, this boat looks like it's being cut off. and he's fairly close to me. And he looks like he's being cut off by the curvature of water. Now look at that as I zoom into him. This is probably a full zoom, and it looks like he's being cut off. But look how big the boat is. And you know, this is a boat that's way out there. Of course, he's way out there. You know, you're thinking that he's being cut off by the curvature of Earth, and you know, you have to really think twice about this because that is not what's going on. Now, you see here, I've got my light, I guess. Again, I told you I turned it the brightness down only because it really whited out the whole screen. Now I'm using the camera, the exposure of the camera, to turn up and down to get more or less light in on it. You can see when I turn it way back, you know, it darkens the screen quite a bit. But there's some rain out there. That rain is way, way farther away than what you might think. You see here as I'm kind of playing around with the lighting of the camera. And then we're going to go to where I started out my camera at on 11/22. This is where my camera was set up. I was out in front of the observation deck. There's a bush out in front of it. Also, on this particular day, look at the sky. It's just thick full of chemtrails. But don't worry, folks. That ain't going to hurt you. What goes up, don't come down. Also, I noticed when the sky is really, really full of these chemtrails, we get a lot of those sundogs. And you've seen one right there. But look at that. I mean, it's just awful, awful. And I don't know if this contributes to more or less light diffraction or anything, but I know this particular day the air was cooler, water was probably about the same temperature, maybe not exactly. But what was really strange about it too is when I go from north to south, there is a difference. Now I took this a little bit later than I took the next little portion I'm going to show you. But this is all from the same day, just a little different time. I mean, you can see this, you know, those little rocks sticking up right there. They're just little rock islands, and they're barely sticking up, but yet I can see them. And on other days where there's a lot of refraction or diffraction, light diffraction, I don't get to see those rocks because the glare, the water getting distorted will block that out. Now, too, also, some of this, you'll see stuff in the far background, and that's pretty interesting, too, because you're going to see this change in the background, and this is how this diffraction and this distortion causes everything to be hidden. Because really what it does is it causes this compression, and it allows everything to be pushed down farther. And again, you know, if you compare these islands to the first islands, which I'll probably do another video on this and you know, show you the comparison photos, or maybe I'll put them at the end of the video. But you see this, like, it's like stretching and pulling, and you know, you see this background. You see it look like clouds. That actually starts the mirroring effect, folks. And when it gets to a certain point, instead of it you know, showing you the water that's back there, it starts mirroring out, and all you see is the mirroring of the water up above. This is part of this optical effect that occurs that causes the lower portions of things to be blocked off. So instead of it being blocked off at these islands like it was in the first part, now I'm only at 5 feet from the water at this point. So, you know, I'm getting a much clearer visible view of these islands, and it's a much clearer, crisper view with a lot less distortion. And I'm seeing the entire island in the water. Otherwise, you know, you wouldn't even see these boats or these other little rock islands that are here. And what's really interesting is my visibility to the north was much better. Different angle of light. Sun during this time of the year is further to the south. So it does give things a different angle. There's the Anclo power plant stack. And I've got other video where it shows that water up much higher. And this stack is magnified, big time magnified. I've got it in other videos where it's much smaller, but you can see more of it. Now, this was earlier when I first got there that day. And what's interesting is that when I get out of my car or my truck and I start walking toward the beach, I look at the Hernando Beach Islands, and I can almost tell immediately if I'm going to have good visibility. And on this particular day, I actually looked to the north and said, wow, I could see a lot of this stuff right here with my eyes. And this is land that's beyond those 3 islands to the north of me that I showed you before. And I'm going to show you again here the 3 islands, but you also see little channel markers. You see further back there, you see islands and cuts between these islands. This is my old stomping ground, my old fishing grounds way up here. And I went up there for years and years and years to fish. And there's the Chasso Wiska channel markers. You can see the green one right there. And I don't have as much distortion. I got a little bit, but you'll see above and beyond some of these islands, you'll see this distortion starting to occur. And again, that distortion, that light diffraction, it all just starts mirroring out, and before you know it, all you see is just whiteness. You don't get to see this landmass back there. You see how it's kind of blurring out, and it's just an optical effect. Now, these islands, in my opinion, yes, they are being magnified a little bit, but they are there, and they are visible. These are not being lifted up from some kind of magical refraction, and this is where, us flat earthers and globers seem to have a difference of opinion. They say that this stuff is being refracted up, pulled up, but one of the things that they never have is they never have any proof of anything being pulled up by refraction. I mean, no tricks, no trade, no nothing, just actual atmospheric conditions, and go out and do these observations and show something that's over the curve on a, on maybe a road, a little hump in the road or something, and show something being pulled up from beyond it. It never happens. You get these layers that occur that causes this mirroring effect that hides all of this stuff. This stuff is usually hidden, but on this particular day, I was picking it up because the light diffraction wasn't really bad, and the visibility was pretty crisp and clear. Again, I could see this with my naked eyes. I could barely faintly make out the land mass back there, but I can see these islands. Now, of course, with the camera, I see them much, much better. And even over here, you start seeing more land mass farther back there. And yes, it is blurred out and it is being magnified, but it's there, folks. It is there. You just don't normally see it because it's too small to resolve. And then you have the light diffracting and causing an upward reflection of light that you totally, like ramping up over all of this out here. You wouldn't even see it. I'm sitting here with my cursor, moving it around like you guys can see it. But that's okay. I'm sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. And the bigger islands are the 3 islands that I say north of me on the other part of the video. You could not see it. You couldn't see hardly any of the islands. And I was at a much higher perspective. I was almost twice as high. I was at 8, 9 feet. But here I'm much further, right? You can see the island far to the left is Coral Key. One in the middle was Saddle Key, and the other one is Sheephead Key to the right. And again, here's your channel markers. The green one. Again, I'm out of focus. Every time I zoom in and zoom out and I get out of focus, it tells me that there is some kind of weather condition or optical condition that causes me to have to focus the camera in. Because on some days I can zoom in on the moon with the P900 in the movie mode, zoom in on the moon without having to focus at all, and I get a perfect view of the moon without having to even adjust the focus. And then other times I zoom in on it and I have to focus it. I have to tweak it a little bit in order to get the real good focus on it. And look, I mean, you can really see a lot of this island, and then you can see more land beyond it. Again, these are observations that I have more of, done at different heights. Matter of fact, I think this day I actually started out filming this thing right at about 28 inches, 30 inches, something like that. So I will make some more videos of November 22nd, 2019, and I'll make them in little increment parts. I'll add in any cell phone video I did of where my camera was located, because later this day I do get my camera down to 28 inches and was still capturing Cutter's Rock beacon light at 11.22 miles out, which should be unheard of. But obviously, visible observations are proof, whether people like it or not. They're proof for me, and I take my observations seriously. So I'm going to add in, like I said, I'm going to add in a couple of the pictures, try to put them in a comparison setting, and let you, decide for yourself what you see. All right, here's a couple comparison pictures. Yeah, the angle's off a little bit. The one I was on top of the observation deck, the other one I was out in front of the observation deck. So you can see the one channel marker is off to the left side more than the other. And then the other one I wanted to do was I pulled one of the other videos in and took a screenshot of the Bayport bird rack. And of course, a little different angle. One I was on top of the bird observation deck, one I was out in front of the observation deck at 5 feet. Big difference. So you can tell for yourself. Visibility does matter.
I want you to think about the answer.
It's 1,000 miles away.
Walter and I were doing a training mission around the United States where you just were building up hours and time. And we take off out of Beale, hit a tanker in Idaho, rip on up to Montana, zip across Denver, hang a right turn in Albuquerque, out over Los Angeles, up to Seattle, back into Sacramento, 2 hours, 21 minutes. And you just do that and you do it backwards, and you hit a tanker. It was just to gain crew coordination, build your hours. We're on our last training mission. We're over Tucson. I can see downtown LA from Tucson. We're at 89,000 feet. I can see the whole western United States bathed in a warm October fall glow.
SR-71 Air Force pilot Brian Schewel states that he was flying above Tucson, Arizona at 89,000 feet, and he was able to see Los Angeles and the whole western seaboard. Now, of course, this is not possible if the Earth is in fact a spinning ball, because Brian Schewel's max view distance would have only been 365 miles, Los Angeles being covered up by 9,970 feet of curved Earth. Let's continue.
I can see the chain of Rocky Mountains from Canada to New Mexico.
Oh, what was that, Brian? Did you just say you could see all the Rocky Mountains from New Mexico to Canada?
I can see the chain of Rocky Mountains from Canada to New Mexico.
I guess Brian did say that. So, from the tip of New Mexico to the very edge of Canada is 1,150 miles.
It's 1,000 miles away.
It's 1,150 miles.
It's 1,000 miles away.
It's 1,150 miles.
Give him a slap. Shake him, shake him.
It's 1,000 miles away.
It's 1,150 miles. Now, I'm assuming Brian was still flying over Tucson when he saw the Rocky Mountains, but even if he wasn't and was in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, his max view distance would not allow him to see either New Mexico or Canada, simply because the Earth is supposed to be curved. If Brian was still flying over Tucson, Arizona, and saw the Rockies extend from New Mexico to Canada, that's 77 miles of missing curved Earth. If he was in the center of the Rockies, he still only has a max view at 365 miles at 89,000 feet. Folks, throw your globes in the trash, wipe the tears away. The Earth is flat, proven by the United States Air Force.
Do I really have to say it?
Say what?
Yes, Kate. Say what?
You need glasses.
And where is his glasses? He can't see without his glasses. Put his glasses on. Put on his glasses. He can't see without his glasses.
Shouldn't see this thing argument.
Giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
That is just impossible under the globe model. 43,848 feet should be hidden behind the curvature.
I calculated that I'm seeing data points out over 500 miles, folks. This is just incredible. Wow. We can go, there's data points even beyond 540, maybe 600 miles out.
Give him a slap.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
The weakest link. Goodbye.